In order to draw a conclusion, you've got to pay attention to what you're reading, but the step before drawing a conclusion, you collecting the data, and then you do something, and then you... Yes, brilliant. Analyze the data.
There were a couple of students in Mr. Griff's first period that we looked at. That were returning students that were of particular interest for that idea of setting the tone for the new year and kind of the classroom management thing.
Or someone's economic needs, Janae, could call.
So I would describe Janae as a student who, she can be incredibly charming, incredibly funny, and she is also a student who has a history of some issues with teachers, and she can go kind of from 0 to 60 really fast in terms of temper or losing her cool and that kind of thing. But Janae that day, initially in the class was fine and pretty focused, but you can start to watch, especially when we reviewed the tape, where you sort of see Janae going from this pretty focused, pretty, on point kind of place to slowly starting to kind of almost unravel. You can see like the foot starts going, she's restless in her chair, and at one point it becomes really clear that Janae is about to blow. That it's like, you can see it coming and you just know she's got to get up in a minute. So
geographic self, not just your, who is in. Janae, I suggest you get out of the bathroom. I know you are, that's why I came and got you.
But it was kind of this perfect, you see him juggling this child who he knows he's got to give her some leeway. He's got to let her be her, a bit of it,
saying.
So he can do a lot of that with Janae through humor.
I thank you.
Through letting her speak, to certain things that she for sure knows. So that calms her down, So you see him kind of playing this line of trying to allow, he knows he has to allow Janae to be Janae, first of all to get the best out of her, but second of all to not have her head explode in the middle of class, but keeping her kind of also controlled enough or cool enough that she can function in the classroom and that the classroom can function. Because Janae is one of those kids that can take a whole class with her.
That there are more check cashing places. Jonathan, open your notebook. Because this is a question that you're going to have to know. You might see it on the test. Because this is the level of thinking that we do.
Jonathan, his kind of persona that he puts out there is that he's kind of always disgusted with the world, which of course is really bad for a classroom dynamic, because if one kid is kind of doing the head wiggle and doing the teeth sucking and everything, that is really contagious in the class. And the day before in class, Jonathan and Mr. Griffith had a big kind of head-to-head blowout. Jonathan was, throwing some attitude out, and Mr. Griffith actually ended up ejecting him from the class. It was going to be interesting to see then how Jonathan coming back into the class the next day, how was Jonathan going to handle it and how was Mr. Griffith going to handle it. Mr. Griffith, he was not focusing on Jonathan in any particular way, and Jonathan was just kind of trying to do the under the radar, I'm just going to sit here and do my work thing, which is fine. But it didn't mean that he was really re-engaged into the class. Probably what was going through Jonathan's head was, what's Mr. Griffith thinking about? And Mr. Griffith might have been, feeling sort of like, ugh, how am I going to get Jonathan back engaged in a way that makes sense? And so he ends up doing that by, you know, he starts to throw out some questions, and he's pushing the kids on something, and there's a question that's difficult that he's trying to get them to connect something to, and Jonathan finally pushes out an answer, and Mr. Griffith just pounces on it. And then later, Jonathan makes a suggestion about a way that they could maybe do an assignment, or he asks if this was part of the assignment, and Mr. Griffith pulls that thread then.
That's what I was asking you for. We had to make a consumption scale.
Oh. Whoa. What is that? That's very interesting. A consumption scale.
And you see on camera this moment where Mr. Griffith, you know, he has his back to the class again, and he says, yes, let's do that as an assignment. And Jonathan in that moment, you know, does this very exaggerated no kind of thing in the background for the benefit of the students, right? So you can sort of see him saying, you know, like, oh, no, no, let's not do that. But then if you watch carefully his body language, you can see in that moment that he's kind of glowing from like this, you know, yeah, I really nailed that one. This is, you know, this is something that's good. You know, so he's back fully, not just fully engaged, but also really invested in the class in a different way, where he knows he's now made this concrete kind of contribution.
How would you illustrate where you stand in terms of wealth in the society, Marcus?
Put a picture of Applebee's.
Applebee's. Why Applebee's?
Because it's mad expensive to eat there.
Ah.
If you eating there, you got bread.
Oh, so the choices that you make, right, illustrate where you are in the economic continuum.
Some of Mr. Griffith's real strengths as a teacher, first of all, he's an incredibly dynamic teacher. He's very
Does anybody
literally he'll move around the room. So she leaves. There is a focus point at the front of the room because that's where kind of notes are being put down. She's gone. The class continues. But he is constantly almost 10 minutes later looking over students' shoulders, direct eye contact with specific students. Mr. Griffith suddenly really just absolutely in different ways. No word to the students, nothing. He just abruptly to kind of walks out of the room and hear everything that's going on in a room. And there were even moments in my observation of him where I thought, oh, I think he's missing that. The perspective from the classroom putting a head down for a couple of minutes later, he walked back in the room because he would just kind of seamlessly go and correct behavior, sitting back down in her seat. What we heard on the tape later was that he had walked over to the bathroom and said something like, Janae, you better get out of that bathroom now. He learns his students very quickly. So he knows the students that he can you know, correct behavior through humor. He knows the students that he has to kind of like put his foot down over. He knows the students he has to whisper in their ear and do it privately. He knows the students that need to actually be taken out of the room and talked to. He has a really intuitive sense about that kind of thing. And that's something that, I mean, that's a strength, that's sort of a natural strength for Mr. Griffith, but it's also something that teachers can really learn, I think, by mostly through being really open to, you know, learning who their students are and knowing who their students are.
You didn't have your hand up all day. Lord, yes.
When you cash a check at a cash shop these days, they take some money.
Ah, when you cash your check at the check cashing place, it costs you money.